Good morning, members, and Mr. Taylor, our member of public and officers. Welcome to this Development Committee meeting for October. I'd just like to introduce the members of the officers to you. If you'd like to give your name, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Management Manager.
Good morning, Lauren Gregory. I'm Democratic Services Officer.
Good morning. My name is James Ashby. I'm the Environment Protection Team Leader.
Good morning. I'm Davina Romain, Senior Environmental Protection Officer, Environmental Health Service.
Good morning, Chairman. I am Philip Ross and I am the Assistant Director of Planning at North Norfolk.
Good morning. I'm Fiona Croxton, one of the Council Solicitors.
And good morning, I'm Pauline Grove Jones and I'm the chair of this committee. The members who will make the decisions are sitting in the front of me here. I will ask that you make sure that your phones are switched off. There's always one. And if you hear the alarm bell go, then that's for real. Don't run, walk to the exits and assemble front and back of the building. And facilities, I'm pleased to say, I have noted fairly well, are placed in the lobby here. I don't think there's anything else I need to say because there's only basically ourselves. Now, apologies for absence, please, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Mancini Boyle, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Varley and Councillor Youssimi.
Right. Substitutes?
Unfortunately, there were substitutes on this occasion.
We seem to be having trouble in finding people to substitute, and we'll have to work out why this is, because it does deplete the members' committee so that making decisions. So perhaps that's something we could look at, Lauren, what's happening here with regards to
Madam Chair,
substitutes.
we did actually try yesterday and we spoke to Democrats to see if there were any apologies so we could arrange substitutes, but there were none yesterday. So maybe it's the length of time that people do submit their apologies would help.
Well, I think we need to look at that anyway. Now we have the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 29th of September. We need to approve them. Are there any queries for them? Yes.
I think,
Holiday.
ma'am, we decided I had a pecuniary interest. I think it says on page 1, I put a non-pecuniary interest in item 8. And it was a pecuniary, but we decided it was non-technical, didn't we?
This was the shell thing, wasn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the pecuniary interest is if you had securities exceeding the value of 25,000. Sorry.
I think the pecuniary interest would only be if you had shares exceeding the value of £25,000 or 100th of the total share capital of that body, and it was taken that you didn't. So in that sense,
So it is non-pecuniary.
non-pecuniary. Yeah, it's for clarification, the relevant authorities disclosable pecuniary interests regulation 2012.
There you are. Anybody else have any queries with the minutes? No? Well, can I ask that we approve these? Would you put your hands up? Minutes are approved.
I abstain, Madam Chairman. I was not present.
Right, on abstention. Items of urgent business, Laura.
There are no items of urgent business.
Order of business will be as stands. Declarations of interest on this one. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's regarding agenda item 8, application PF 21/2650. Whilst I have no declarable interest in the matter, for the avoidance of doubt, I should state that as ward member, I have been contacted on several occasions by the applicant and their agent and provided such advice as was reasonable. Further, I have an association with Councillor Seward, met with officers to discuss progress with the application. However, as I shall make clear during the debate, I do not consider myself either predisposed or predetermined in regard to this application.
Thank you. We'll now go to the officers' reports. The first report is North Walsham. PF/21/265. Now, we have got quite a lot of papers that we were asked to read. I'm going to ask, have you read the 2 legal opinions? You don't need any more time to have a look at those then. And the other one that I will ask you as we get towards the local members is the report from Councillor Seward. Have you read that, or would you like some more minutes to look at that? No? Fine. Okay, then Officer Lyon is going to present this first
Thank you, Chairman.
application.
So, okay, this is an application for technical details consent following on from permission in principle for the demolition of existing buildings on site and the erection of 4 dwellings and associated parking and gardens. The agenda starts on page 13. I'll just start with an update. So in section 6 of the main issues for consideration, we refer to habitats reg. So that's pages 23 and 24 on the agenda. So under GI RAMS, the report refers to the applicant not having paid a tariff of just over £740 towards mitigating recreational disturbance impacts associated with the 4 dwellings. So in the absence of the tariff as set out in the report, and the applicant not having demonstrated that the development would not have a localised and in combination effect on European sites, that was part of the reason for refusal set out on refusal reason 3 on page 37. However, as of the 20th of October, we have now received that payment. So that addresses the GI RAMS concern as set out in the report. So that no longer forms part of the reason for refusal on a decision. So as the chair set out, we've had a number of additional documents in addition to the committee agenda. So we forwarded a copy of the appeal decision for the permission in principle. We have the applicant's legal advice that has been forwarded, and we've had the NNDC legal advice. So hopefully you all have those. And as the chair said, we've also had written submissions from Councillor Eric Seward. So in terms of the officer report, yes, it's lengthy and it's detailed. I'm sure it's covered a lot of the points that I know members will want to talk about today. It identifies that in many aspects, the proposal would accord with relevant development plan policies. However, the close proximity of an existing poultry business has given rise to significant concerns about how occupiers of the proposed residential units would be provided with high quality residential amenities, having regard to such matters as odour, noise, dust, lighting and pests, which are associated with the adjoining poultry farm. Now, these issues are set out in section 7 across pages 24 to 30 of the report. Furthermore, concerns are set out across pages 30 and 31 of the report that the proposed development would fail to provide external amenities in accordance with relevant guidance, resulting in deficient levels of usable private amenity space. The proposal would therefore fail to accord with requirements of core strategy policies EN4 and EN13. Section 13 of the report on pages 34 and 35 raises concerns about the impact of the shortcomings on residential amenities on the existing poultry business, which would face significant pressures to mitigate or reduce its existing operations, options which are unlikely not to be possible or viable. Officers consider that the applicant has not demonstrated that the proposed development would not adversely impact on the operations and viability of the adjoining business. And this is contrary to the objectives of para 187 of the NPPF. If permitted, this could eventually result in significant conflict between land uses, and the social and economic impacts of such conflict could be significant, having both local and wide-ranging effects. The Council's legal advice has confirmed at paragraph 41 that the permission in principle does not constrain the LPA from considering all other matters, including whether the specific development proposed is acceptable, having regard to matters of residential amenity and the potential impact of neighbouring uses on residents of the proposed development. So the Council's Senior Environmental Protection Officer and Protection Team Leader are in attendance today should members of committee have specific questions on residential amenity or the adjacent poultry unit. So the recommendation is one of refusal as set out at points 1 and 2 on page 36 of the agenda. As I set out at the beginning of the presentation, the applicant has now provided the GI RAMS mitigation tariff, and this removes refusal reason 3, as has been set out on the top of page 37 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Lyon. We have no town or parish representative here and no objection. Right. We have Mr. Taylor, who is supporting this application. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Taylor. I don't know why that's sticking straight up in the air there. Fiona will show you how this works. That's it. So
That's it. Okay.
you'll have 3 minutes from the moment you start speaking,
Okay.
Mr. Taylor.
Thanks for allowing me time to speak in support of my application. The amenity assessments requested by the council were duly carried out and provided. Prior to commissioning the assessments, we sought to agree the scope of the work to be undertaken from the council. The response to this query in mid-December was the applicant's noise odour consultants should be aware of the industry and requirements and standards, including British standards for assessment. This is therefore the scope established by the council and the one will be followed. All the consultants who undertook the amenity assessments have the requisite education and qualifications to undertake the assessments and undertook them in accordance with British standard. Addressing the reasons for refusal directly, the council was aware when the surveys were undertaken, as we were given an extension of time in order to do them. The opinion of the Environmental Health Office is based on anecdotal evidence from public complaints in other locations, which did not lead to any further action by the council or the EA. In contrast, our evidence is based on quantitative and qualitative studies undertaken directly at the proposed site. All the surveys came back with no detrimental issues. The complaints made to the council appear to be made between December and April, the approximate timeframe when we did our surveys. There's a 9 to 12 foot wall surrounding the proposed site that also blocks out any light, noise or possible odours from the poultry farm. We've covered all the possible amenity issues, including use of standard pest control systems, which all new builds have these days. We have permission in principle, which determines the site is acceptable for residential use. This should not be refused for technical details consent, but should be worked through to find an agreeable compromise, which we feel we've done. We've worked proactively providing any information by planning. At no time have planning or EHO offered any recommendation or advice on how to mitigate these issues. In terms of external amenity space, the dimensions provided in the report are incorrect. They're actually 70 to 154 metres, which they meet all regulations, except for plot 6, which is, plot 3, which is slightly smaller. In conclusion, the assessments for all the highlighted amenity issues were carried out in accordance with the scope given to us by the council and British standard. Where the issues were identified, mitigation measures were proposed, and these can be conditioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. If you'd like to go and sit down again. Now we have 2 local members, as you are aware. I'll now ask councillor Heinrich to present his case.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I shall focus on what I consider the pertinent facts of this application. We know the initial application for the site PP/20/0160 was for permission in principle, something novel to this council. Due to concerns regarding the proximity of the poultry farm and other policy matters, a partial site visit took place, albeit that was during COVID restrictions and therefore not necessarily as informative as a site visit should be. However, at the time, neither I nor other members present noted any odour or noise issues arising from the poultry operation. We also noted that the outbuildings of Melbourne House, which were converted apparently without any objections on environmental grounds, were only a few metres further away from the farm. So there is a large development nearby ready. The application was refused but overturned on appeal, and the inspector has stated, though, the appeal is allowed and permission in principle is granted for residential development comprising a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 4 dwellings. So this principle of development site is on that basis, I believe, established. The inspector's report made no mention of any issues relating to the poultry farm. and perhaps be a closer reading. Then we have council opinion from the applicant, and we have the council opinion commissioned by ourselves, neither of which are totally clear and in some ways cancel each other out. No doubt our legal advisor will have something to say on that. So if it goes back to the officer's report, I note the objection from Banham Poultry. However, if the site is operating at best available techniques, then impact on adjacent properties should be minimal. However, the officer's report argues at length that issues of ammonia, dust and odour are or would be such as to potentially become a statutory nuisance. But we have a detailed study of these issues that seem, as reported, to be okay. So either that is inadequate or the evidence to be provided by officers is not adequate. If the applicant's data is not sufficient, why were additional studies not requested and appropriate advice given? I know, or I'm aware of 10 complaints, some of which are quite ancient and from properties well away from the site. The most recent ones were during the COVID lockdowns when people were more sensitive to everything. There's no evidence that those referred on that any action was taken. Of the earlier ones, they were abandoned because there was no evidence. The Environment Agency letter of 20th of April states that in regard to ammonia, dust and odour, we have no comment to make regarding ammonia and dust emissions from a permitted poultry farm. The site has never had reported issues with either of these emissions. The odour assessment undertaken in the report took place between 18 Jan 22 and 15th March 22, and we have no concern with the findings. Leave you to ponder that one. Despite this, the report makes much of the professional opinion of our environmental protection officers. I respect those opinions, but they need to be backed by hard evidence, especially relating to this specific site and not a general aversion to development near poultry farms. Now, I'd happily accept the recommendation if the evidence can clearly prove that development here would be so detrimental that it should not take place. I'd also make the point that there are odour issues in this part of North Walsham going back decades. Those of us who were living there in the 60s and 70s will remember the foul smells from the sewage works, and they haven't changed, just a little bit less frequent. We also remember living in an agricultural area, so there will be smells from farming activities, including the spreading of chicken manure on fields, along with pig slurry and goodness knows what else. But, so we have an application that complies with policy EN 2 and EN 4. It complies in relation to Melbourne House, listed building, with EN 8. The housing mix meets the requirement of HO1. College and habitats are compliant with EN 2, EN 4 and EN 9. Nutrient neutrality is not an issue. There's some mention, I note in the report, of issues regarding rats and other pests. We're well aware that rats can be a major problem in urban areas and on cliff faces as well. Not too far from here. You know, if there is a significant problem with rats in the area, you're not going to let me finish then, Chairman.
Go on then quickly.
Okay, I mean, lighting and so on is there. Highways and so on is fine. We've got a scheme before us that has permission in principle, meets most required policies. Small scale, provides bungalows, high sustainability of those buildings. I could happily support the recommendation if it can be proven there is a problem. At the moment, I'm not, but I can be persuaded. I would consider proposing a deferral to enable a full formal site visit to take place, to enable evidence from environmental health to be detailed to members, for negotiation to take place on any mitigations that might be required, and to consider whether 3 dwellings is more appropriate given the exterior space than 4. However, I'm not going to formally do that at the moment because I think we need a full and open discussion on this application. So I'll leave that sitting there. I'm aware that somebody may well second me on that. So I'll leave that sitting there and come back to it if necessary. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I've got two members who wish to speak. Now, Fiona, do you want to wait till the members have spoken and then have your say, or? Wrong one.
I was simply just going to pick up on one point. I've read both the opinions. I don't think the council opinion is seeking to undermine the location of the site as such. It's not challenging the permission in principle that's been granted. I think it's saying that it's a broader consideration, the technical detail consent, which encompasses also a consideration of the health of the owners, occupiers of the property, and that residential amenity is a matter within the technical detail consent stage that can be considered on that basis. So I don't find the two opinions totally incompatible, actually. They are apart on the fact that the Tim Straker opinion does say that he considers a permission in principle and a technical detail consent application akin to an outline and a reserved matters approval. And the council opinion says that's not quite such a simple analogy. It's the technical detail consent that actually grants that permission as such, although there are certain principles which are enshrined within the and which have been considered already at the permission in principle stage, and one of those is location. So that's really where they are apart on this discussion. So I don't think the council is seeking to undermine the location as such. It's saying that there is a broader consideration here because of the adjacent poultry sheds and the implications of that. That helps.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Oh, excuse me 1 minute.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, but I believe you speak now.
It's a point of order that's important before we proceed to any further debate, Chairman. If there is a potential for members to defer this item for a site visit, then we should consider that at the earliest possible stage. Further debate at this moment may prejudice the consideration of the application at a later stage when it's returned back from any site visit. It's good practice to consider any vote at this time.
I don't think Councillor Heinrich has actually made a proposition for a referral.
I'm merely saying I am minded to, but I wish to hear further debate before I do so.
Okay, I think if the members are in agreement, we'll hear the what members want to say about this. We'll note what officer.
Chair, before we go to the debates, would it not be sensible to invite any comment from the environmental?
Well, I'm not sure if that's appropriate now, or we'll wait till we hear the members. What do you think, Stuart? I think possibly we'll wait till we hear what the members have to say. Right, now can I ask Councillor Fitch-Tillett, please?
I think I can go ahead, Madam Chairman. Right, some members in the room, perhaps not many these days, will recall that I had at least 10 years experience in the poultry industry, added to which I had no less than 3 poultry farms in my ward. The only time that there is occasionally complaints is when they are clearing the sheds. Now, I believe if somebody can tell me whether these are chickens or turkeys or ducks, it does depend. I mean, if it's chickens, then probably it's going to be cleared about once every 6 weeks. And that is yes, thank you. So that is really the only time. And obviously when we had a site visit before, they weren't actually clearing the sheds at the time. And it depends on the wind, it depends on all sorts of things. But most of the time they are totally benign.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I attended the site visit last year or earlier on this year. I can't quite remember. You get to my age, but I remember it well. And I attended the committee meeting development meeting afterwards. And at that stage, having considered all the arguments, I voted in favour, but the application subsequently failed. I said at the time, this will be back here again soon because the inspector will overturn our decision, and that's proven to be the case. I've read the conflicting legal positions. I know the legal positions suggest that they're not conflicting. When I read them, I'm not a barrister and I don't pretend to be, but both offer legal precedent. And to me, they both sort of cancel each other out. And, you know, I'll come out and say it. I think to be presented with two opposing legal positions to a development committee is not really the way forward in this, and it just adds confusion. I was also a ward member for this particular ward for 8 years until 2019 when the boundaries changed. I'll reiterate what Councillor Heinrich says, is that alongside this proposed area, we have Melbourne House, which the council did not reject. When that came before them, it was approved for being upgraded and being made fit for residential use. And it's just a few metres away from this particular application site. I'd like to say that the applicant has tried to work really proactively with the officers. I can see that, and that's relevant. It's been said this morning again. And I think we should take that into account. The sewage plant isn't mentioned in this report. It's a stone's throw away. It's just at the rear of the caravan sites that lie adjacent to the application site. And as a resident of North Walsham, and I'm sure many people here as residents of North Norfolk would agree, strong ammonia smells are not uncommon in this county. And I'd like to really understand how those sort of smells due to muck spreading and fields, common practices, how the difference between identifying the chicken farm in question is the culprit. I don't understand that. Same thing goes with the sewage plant, which is known to have problems in the past. And Anglian Water are often called to go and do stuff, but God knows what, but it does work what they do to prevent the smells down there. There are many local residents surrounding this site, and hundreds actually. And despite all the complaints to the chicken farm, it's still there. No move has ever been made to shut it down. And I'd hate to see that happen. I have to say it's an existing business, and that weighs heavily on me, that allowing this to go ahead today might well put pressure on that existing business. However, we've heard what Councillor Fitch-Tillett has said this morning. On my site visit, I've had no smells or no noise implications. So summing up, I'm not going to make a recommendation yet because I want to hear what others have to say, particularly environmental health. But no, you can see the way I'm going for this. I'm up for maybe reducing the number of houses if that satisfies planners. But I really can't see a problem with this. And I think the applicant has worked hard to demonstrate that to this council. Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also did attend site visits on this site, and the occasion that I was there, there was no smell, and I'm familiar with the site. I also voted for this, in favour of this at the last application. For me, the work on Melbourne House that's gone ahead, this is, and it's to a high standard, and it's still very close to the chicken shed. There's been no complaints from the resident there. I think there's public benefit in this application in removing what is an old and ugly building. This is a small development, and I'm pleased to see for once that it's within the building, they've already come forward with solar panels, ground source heating, which is good to see. It doesn't often happen, which is pleasant to see. The applicant seems to have tried to address all the issues. He's had olfactometric testing done, and the data seems to prove that there are no issues. I'm surprised at the length of the report and the lack of actual data and empirical evidence from our environmental health officers. Quite often here, we're trying to prove a negative, which is for me a weak argument. I'm undecided about this. I'd like to hear what other members have to say, but the applicant is aware of the location. He, if he's going to build the houses, if he can't sell them, then caveat vendor, it would be his loss, wouldn't it? So it's a difficult one for me, but I think we spent a lot of time and effort and money on a very small issue here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from Environmental Protection, please, about the studies that were done. I mean, as far as the dust monitoring, it seems fairly cursory, and I'd like to know more details about the odour survey. It looks as if noise is a real issue if they're proposing to put in acoustic glazing and mechanical ventilation with heat recovery as mitigations. That sounds as if that's noise is pretty serious. I mean, this may be completely different. I cycle past the Langham turkey farms on a pretty much daily basis, and they always smell, but then perhaps turkeys are smellier than chickens. I don't know, but I'd like to hear more detail from Environmental Protection, if I could, about the tests that were done by the applicant about their rebuttal of the findings. Thank you.
Once members have finished stating their opinions, then I'll ask Environmental. Nigel PS. Councillor PS.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I think the legal advice says how complex this is. It isn't a small issue. I'm always in favour, hopefully, as seen by the members of development. There's a couple of things that do concern me if it goes ahead. And it says in the report here that the poultry business is already operating at best possible practice. So therefore, should odour complaints, noise, dust, etc., come in the future from an approved scheme, there's no point in them complaining. I think that's got to be made definite, because it says here it's operating in best possible practice. The poultry business can do no more. I think that has to be strongly recommended. As regards the legal arguments, both sides, there is a point to what Nigel Lloyd says, my colleague, that one tends to cancel the other out. I only ask, I hope it isn't seen as a silly question, because I don't see it mentioned here. At the moment, we are suffering the vagaries of a bird flu area. And it can, in certain strains, be transferred to humans. I don't see anything in there that covers that, unless I've missed it because I'm blind. I think, that is an issue for me as well. It doesn't mean to say that I'm against it, but I think something should be said for it. We're sitting in this bird flu area at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank officers for a very good report. I just want to be clear in my own mind that the permission in principle isn't, if you like, a predetermination that permission or consent should be granted today. It's merely one aspect of the process, and unless we agree the technical details consent, then we're not hidebound by the permission in principle decision by the inspector against the earlier refusal of this committee in January last year. I mean, this application is much to commend it. It doesn't impact on the Melbourne heritage asset. We've read in the report. It's the right type of property in terms of its mix. It complies with policy HO1 on page 21. There are no problems with nutrient neutrality, just so that people who are watching this online are wondering why we're looking at approving overnight accommodation. It's because North Walsham discharges into the North Sea and not into the special areas of conservation which are caught by the nutrient neutrality embargo. The arboricultural plan can be settled by condition. That can be resolved. The inspectors looked at the spatial implications because it is outside the settlement boundary for North Walsham. but that's settled. So in terms of its location, it's permissible. The issue really here that stands out is that is one of whether it complies with policy EN4 and EN13. In other words, is it acceptable in terms of its residential amenity? And paragraph 185 of the NPPF is on the same page in that it says the development must be appropriate for its location, taking into account the likely effects of pollution on health and living conditions. So we move to the living conditions and the effects on health. I mean, this is a large poultry unit, Bluebell Poultry Unit, it's got an environmental permit, which means it's a premiership poultry unit. It's 150,000 birds. It has implications for massive discharge of ammonia gas into the atmosphere. I don't quite know how a 9-foot wall is going to mitigate against that, I have to say. So there is a significant risk to the health of residents if this development goes ahead because of the proximity of its location. And particularly ammonia, which doesn't perhaps shout out in this report, is a real concern. It's been highlighted in the UK Clean Air Act policy, which was introduced in 2019. I think it's widely accepted in planning circles that the research, the monitoring and the regulations into ammonia output is pretty woeful and is science that is developing, perhaps like the science of the effects of avian flu. So what I would like to see is more details submitted before we make a decision on light pollution. The report's highlighted that is not adequate, that even there's further consideration of which brick type is correct. But the main issue for me is really on odor, noise, dust, lighting and pest implications. We've seen in the report, and I'm sure the environmental protection team will go on to say, that there isn't any worst case scenario submission in the reports, which I think is important, and we should have that. By way of obiter dicta, what this speaks to me is that we really ought to have a better planning protocol in place so that applicants know and their experts know what is expected of them in terms of addressing planning issues. You know, with this toing and froing of, is this report adequate? No, we want a further report on some aspect or other, seems to me to be, you know, a deficiency in our planning process, but that's not for this authority. That's a matter for national government to address. So I would be quite, on what I've seen so far, I would be quite happy, not necessarily to have a site visit, but to defer this until we get further information from the applicant. And I congratulate the applicant on working with us. And you know, I have no predetermination on how this should go at this stage until we get further information, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Now I'm going to pass to the environmental health officers now. Who's going to speak first?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think the fact that you have two very senior environmental protection officers here today is indicative of the magnitude of the potential impacts that could arise as a result of this development as it's currently proposed going ahead in this location. And we are happy to answer any queries that you may have on this matter. What I think is a good point to start with is that the poultry farm itself is subject to an environmental permit. Now, just to clarify, the local authority, we have responsibility for inspecting some polluting processes and some sectors of industry that are polluting. And that is our role for dealing with some of the lower levels of polluting processes that exist. The Environment Agency are technically our bigger brother. They deal with the grander, higher scale polluting processes. So With regard to this particular site, if it was under 40,000 birds, it would be fall down to the local authority to investigate, to regulate, to undertake site visits more regularly, and to have a greater level of involvement with the site. But as this is a site for 150,000 birds, this is a substantial poultry unit. And as a result, it does fall to the Environment Agency to undertake any assessments and to regulate this particular site. And that is because of the high level of potential pollution, the fugitive emissions that can be given can arise from this site, and the detrimental impact it can have on nearby local residents and other ecosystems, the environment, the wider environment. So as a result, we have a very, very highly potentially polluting process that is happening in this location. And the proposal for residential development in very, very close proximity. And that with it carries a number of very, very serious concerns. And it has been so serious that I have also attended on site and have actually conducted my own assessment. And that assessment took place on the 16th and the 17th and the 18th of May this year. And on those visits, there were only 136,000 birds. I say only, but there can obviously be up to 150,000 birds on site. And I have actually produced my own report, which I feel is a much better and more accurate reflection of the odour, noise, dust and pest-related issues that this site can cause and has the potential to cause and to detrimentally impact any proposed residential dwelling within close proximity. And in my assessment, I considered that there wasn't just a statutory nuisance on the boundary with the application site, it was a substantial statutory nuisance. So this means where a statutory nuisance is where the the odour issues, the noise issues, the pest issues can have a material interference with people's ability to use and enjoy their property, where it can have a detrimental impact on the health of those residents, and particularly if they've got other conditions as well. Those can be vastly exacerbated by these particular issues that the poultry site would give rise to. The poultry site has a 49-day turnaround. And between days 33 and 49 are when there's going to be the most significant issues in terms of odour, noise, dust, pests, and lighting. And over this sort of 15-day period, is when I undertook my site visit to coincide with the cleaning out of the catching of the birds, the cleaning out of the poultry units, and during these visits, I made a number of different assessments. So I said over a number of days, and it's my professional opinion that we would have a number of statutory nuisances actually on that boundary. And as you know, from having looked at the site plans, the proposed location of these dwellings is in extremely close proximity to the site boundary. So it is my professional opinion that we would end up with significant problems in terms of odour, dust, noise, lighting, and particularly flies. I have looked at the noise and the odour assessments, and in my professional opinion, the authors of those reports have vastly underestimated the acoustic and the odour environment in this location. When they have undertaken those visits, they have coincided with the days perhaps 1 and 33 after that 49-day life cycle. They have not coincided with a time when a catching process would be taking place. And this is very evident in a lot of the detail of the report. For example, the report insists that the poultry site only operate between the hours of 7 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night, Monday to Sunday, Well, from my own experience and having been on site and working with the poultry farm and speaking to them firsthand, they operate from midnight through until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening. You know, and therefore there's a lot of factually incorrect, inconcise information in the odour report and in the noise report. The odour report itself looks at a number of different locations which don't really correspond with the proposed location of the residential dwellings. And it's not representative, neither reports are representative of a worst case scenario. They have assessed it and considering the vast amount of operations that take place on site, they've selected a very, very narrow field to assess. And then they've looked at mitigation for that very, very narrow field. And actually what the reports do miss is they have not considered all the operations that take place on site, because all of these operations have the potential to significantly affect you know, the health of residents, potential residents living on that site. With regard to Mr. Taylor's queries over a lack of advice over how to mitigate the issues, it's very difficult to understand, it's very difficult for me to provide that advice because usually distance is the only feature that will mitigate to a reasonable extent to help to mitigate the effects, the harmful effects of odour, dust, noise and pests. And therefore this section of land, the proposed application site, has effectively been operating as a buffer strip for a number of years for residents living further away. You haven't got any complaints from the actual application site itself because you don't have residents living on there. We do have complaints from those living further afield, for example, within 200 metres, and that is very, very concerning. Those complaints are only going to increase if this development takes place, because those residents are going to be more exposed to higher concentrations of noise, odour, dust, and have a greater interference from pests such as flies. The evidence that I have obtained during my visit, and I'm more than happy to forward my report, which is a subjective assessment, and I would be happy to provide that report so that you can see what the potential impacts are and where the existing noise and odour reports have failed to address some of these critical issues. With regard to odour from other areas of North Walsham, agricultural spreading of muck is a very traditional practice. It's very commonplace. It has a specific purpose and it occurs at a specific time in the crop cycle. And again, the spreading of muck has to comply with the DEFRA guidelines, and that includes integrating that material into the soil. Therefore, when muck is spread on the field, it is integrated into the soil. There will be some residual odour for a period of time as it dies off, but that is not going to be on such a regular basis as this 49-day cycle, which the business operates. It's a 49-day cycle in which the birds arrive to the point where the site is cleaned for further birds to arrive. With regard to the regulation of this particular site, Environmental Protection have received a number of complaints over the years, and residents, when they are considering who to complain to, have a number of different options. They can complain to Environmental Protection, they can complain to the Environment Agency, or they can complain to the site directly. Now, we don't know, because we have not been provided with records from the site, how many complaints the site have received. We are duty bound to investigate complaints that we receive from residents regarding odour, noise, dust and pests. However, we often will I suggest that it would be more better for the residents to speak to the Environment Agency directly, as they are the principal authority, they are the regulator for this industry, and therefore they would be involved in undertaking site visits and following up complaints. However, as obviously mentioned here already today, the poultry business can do no more. It is already operating at best practice, and including all the best practice available in the industry. There is no more that business can do, and therefore we are noticing that perhaps that is causing a tailing off of complaints, and people are not necessarily making those complaints because whilst it's unpleasant, the levels of odour are unpleasant. You know, if nothing can be done at this stage, they may see there's little point in complaining. With regard to environmental protection, we are duty bound to investigate these complaints. However, we are seriously hampered in our ability to take enforcement action for an EA permitted site. Where we witness a statutory nuisance, we may be able to serve an abatement notice. However, the business itself would have the defence of best practicable means, and that is a defence that can be introduced at 2 stages in an abatement notice and the enforcement of an abatement notice process. Additionally, we would also need permission from the Secretary of State to enforce an abatement notice that this authority issues. Consequently, this makes it extremely hard for us to ever properly investigate a complaint from this site or as a result of this site.
Are you nearly through?
Yes, thank you. I'll end that so my colleague can pick up.
Can I just ask, do you not have any conversations with the Environment Agency? It seems as if there's a mispass here, that you have your opinions, etc., and the Environment Agency are working at another level. So do you not communicate with each other?
Yes. So the environment officer that I speak to is Steve Grice, and he is of the same opinion as myself. However, when the Environment Agency asked to comment on this particular application, they can only comment from a different viewpoint as to how the residents will impact the business. They are not able to talk about how the business is able to impact on the residents, and so that is the problem in their consultation response, is it comes from a different perspective. The Environment Agency also have a very different enforcement approach. Environmental protection, we will serve a notice, we will issue an abatement notice, and we will take enforcement action. The Environment Agency, and we have unable to influence how they investigate and what action they take. They have their own mandate and they will take their own investigation, and that will be vastly different to us. And that may well be ensuring that the site itself is compliant with the permit. If it's compliant with the permit and it's achieving its best practice, there's nothing further that can be done.
Thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that, if I may. I think just sort of there's several levels of this that I think you can delve down into. And I think obviously the concerns that Davina has raised, essentially what we would do with any development like this, we would look at those aspects. And I think the difficulty that we've had with this particular site is that the standard of the report in terms of the information that we require to make an appropriate assessment. So Davina's identified a large number of potential issues that could be quite severe. And obviously when we report, what we would look for in that report is that to present subjective and empirical information that may help our understanding the site of how it functions, which may in turn perhaps lower some of our concerns. Unfortunately, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times here in this meeting this morning, in that what we look for in terms of the report, which is essentially a scientific assessment, what we're looking for is worst case scenario. And only when we get that information can we make a good assessment on whether we feel the development is going to cause a substantial impact or not. I think in this occasion, I think, and it's been raised through the process that times that the assessment has been made from the point of view of the consultant has not really coincide what we consider worst case scenario for the site. And I think that's a major failing in the report, which makes it really difficult for us to actually to have a great deal of confidence that it's not an issue. So I think it really is around the potential of the site. And I think it's really important to mention that, yeah, we do have a number of complaints over the years, which actually through working with the business and Environment Agency's involvement has not then gone to the next stage of a statutory nuisance. But there is something changing here, that there are dwellings which are becoming much, much closer to that development, which does change the playing field somewhat. So I reiterate what my colleague Davina says, that there is a high potential here that it could cause some serious issues in terms of stat nuisance and amenity issues as well.
Councillor Kershaw has asked if he can come back. Yes, and Councillor Brown would like to come back, and then Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is a special. I'm allowing this.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it brief. I go back to my previous point, and we've heard how serious the EHO are taking this particular situation. We've seen that in the report, but if it was so serious, why have we not had data? Why have we not had further tests? Why has it been brought back to council? I've heard subjective, I've heard could be, I've heard maybe, but there's no empirical data here. I don't see how we are supposed to grasp the situation. We're looking at potential worst case situations. We need to know the facts. There are no facts here, and that really concerns me deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just looking on the planning portal at a letter from the Environment Agency, 7th of December 2021, to the Planning Authority here. And it refers to, in terms of dealing with statutory nuisances, it refers to mitigation can be provided through the design of the new development to minimise exposure to the neighbouring pig or poultry farm, and or through financial contributions to the operator of the farm to support measures that minimise impacts. My question is, how does that work? How are those financial contributions created? Is it through the planning process? Is it through some statutory process? I'm just posing the question because that is going to come into the thinking moving forward before we make a decision, I suggest. Thank you, Chair.
Who can answer that one? Fiodan, do you have anything to say on that? Financial.
Yeah, I mean, they can be made obviously through the Section 106 agreement process to mitigate. The difficulty is when a development comes forward, you're normally mitigating the effect of that development around the areas. Jeff may know better than me in terms of the development paying for any mitigation measures. It seems that those measures would go towards the poultry units. But from what I've heard today, I mean, I think the biggest mitigation problem is that the proximity, how can you deal with proximity of the dwellings to the poultry sheds? There doesn't seem to be anything which will mitigate that problem.
Yeah. And now Jeff would like to say something.
I mean, it's quite unusual for us to have a request from the Environment Agency for monies to upgrade an adjoining site. When I look at it from the opposite position, let's say we were looking at a residential development and we wanted to put this poultry unit next to those residential development. How would we approach that sort of situation? And the fact that we have a poultry unit that's in position and we have no real direct control over that, we can't impose planning conditions on the poultry unit. We can only use the permit regime to manage that process, and they're doing all they can to do that. We can't. I'm not sure what monies were paid to improve if they're already achieving best available techniques. So I don't see that necessarily as a solution. It may be potentially possible, but I don't see what it would deliver on the ground other than just raise expectation that something can be done that perhaps can't be done. I mean, we have to come back to the point here. We've asked the applicant to provide the information. They've had a copy of Davina's responses. We've asked for the updated reports and they haven't been provided. we've had to come to this committee because we've made a commitment that we'll bring it to the earliest committee for decision. So it's not through lack of officers asking for this information. We've reached a point where we've been told that information won't be provided and the committee will need to make a decision on what's in front of them. We've raised concerns. We've framed it as the applicant failing to demonstrate. And at the end of the day, it has to be the applicant who has to demonstrate that their development will not result in adverse impacts for those residents. Because if we grant permission, we have a potential here that the poultry unit next door may decide to challenge our decision. Because if we haven't come to a sound basis for making that decision, then we're open for JR straight away. That's something that concerns me. But if we just take a punt and say, oh yeah, we think it's fine, it's a huge risk, and you end up with 4 dwellings there, residents who may be subject to severe amenity concerns. Yes, the market may decide that those properties can't be sold or they have to go for low rent, but when we get low rent, we know who ends up occupying those properties, vulnerable people. And as a planning authority, we have a responsibility to make sure we allow acceptable forms of development, and that's why we feel this is not quite hit the nail on the head and we need to issue a refusal reason.
I've already allowed 3 other people to speak, 2 other people to speak, Councillor Pearce, and then you will finish with that.
Madam Chairman, it'll take 10 or 15 seconds. You can count them. We've just listened to a discussion. We've now had a report from environmental people that could change and sway members' discussions. Surely the environmental report should have been put forward first before we had a discussion. It's a point of protocol, and our discussion would have been a lot quicker and clearer.
I think I made the decision that that the members should be heard, and then environmental health would be heard. So that's down to me, Nigel. Councillor, who wanted to speak next? Oh, it's Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm in a bind here. The applicants provided detailed scientific evidence over a significant period of time. Environmental health, I respect the opinion, but they were there for 3 days, and they do appear to be coming from a predetermined position, I have to say. They have not provided us with any firm scientific data to countermand the data provided by the applicant. A problem there. Also say, I've experienced living close to a chicken farm. I grew up 10 metres from a poultry house. we have small holding with 5,000 poultry. So I didn't notice the problem then. Maybe I'm immune to it, that's all I can say. But I don't have sufficient evidence, hard scientific evidence, to go with the recommendation at this moment. And whether we need to defer, I don't know. It may be appropriate to put that deferral proposal actually forward now, and we'll see what members think.
You're putting forward a proposal.
I think this might be an appropriate point to put forward a formal deferral, so we can have a further site visit at a time when there is going to be a maximum potential nuisance. So our officers can come back and give us some firm scientific evidence that there isn't a major issue. So there can be further negotiation on any mitigations. And I still think we are looking at too many properties on this site in terms of the available space, and moving them back slightly further back, so that potentially to bring it back to 3. And that is my proposal, Chair.
Right, thank you. Jeff wants to speak next, and then Philip, and then environmental health.
Okay. Just having heard the suggestion for deferral, I'm a little unsure. I mean, as a committee, we've been asked to consider the application that's before us, and what's before us is up to 4 dwellings on this site. We don't have a proposition for a lesser number than those, and that would be a materially different scheme if we're talking about moving elsewhere on the site. So as a committee, we have to decide what is before us. In terms of the request for physical empirical evidence or data from environmental health, it's quite unusual to request a consultee to provide actual data. I mean, the data is, that comes from the applicant. So the data work is normally done by the applicant, and we would comment on that data. We've provided those comments where we said quite clearly that we feel it's deficient in various areas. It's not for the environmental team to do the work of the applicant and provide that data to support their case. So we've raised the concerns. It's now a matter for the applicant to go back and provide the data that's been requested so that we can then review that. That's the way the planning process works. It's not for the local authority to do the work of the applicant. We've raised those concerns, and the applicant has chosen not to take forward those concerns. So that's a matter for the applicant as to why they've not taken forward those requests for that updated information. It's not for the environmental protection team to do that work for them. So if we were to defer, I'm not quite sure what the deferral basis would be. A site visit, is that going to show a genuine basis for assessing the application? You might go out on a day when there is an odour. You may also go out on a day when there isn't an odour. So I'm not sure what the value would be of going out on a site visit, but I'll leave it at that.
Officer Rowson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say that the purpose of the planning system is to put the right development in the right place. It isn't about buyers being beware of concerns of the local environment. It's our duty as a council to put the right development in the right place. And that's what this debate is about today. I'd also like to say that the legal opinions that members have been given have been largely compliant, as you've heard from your legal officer. There is a significant departure in terms of the consideration, and I would point members, and the debate is headed in this direction, for a discussion which relates to the matters surrounding the health implications from this development. We are lawfully and rightfully allowed to consider those matters under the details in discharge that you're considering today. And I'm pleased to hear the debate is focused on these matters. That is right and it's appropriate. So I hope that any elements of confusion have been dispersed by this debate. My concern, Chairman, is that the reason for refusal in front of you on page 36 of the report talks about the application failing to demonstrate that it could be integrated effectively within the existing network of development that surrounds it. So it's a failure to demonstrate, Chairman. And when we look at the council's planned policies, they do give the option for officers to say that proposals have failed to demonstrate these issues. It's not for the officers at this stage or for members to consider that there is an excessive level of harm. However, you have heard from our environmental protection officers a professional view that arises to a significant level of harm. In fact, so significant in the opinion from their reporting and consideration on site that it would be so significant to mitigate an abatement notice to be served. These are significant issues. They're not matters that you will generally hear coming forward from an environmental protection team or indeed from your planning service. These are significant considerations that are unanswered to date. So I turn you back, Chairman, and members to the reason for refusal. It is right and appropriate to talk about a reason for refusal which relates to a failure to demonstrate to a reasonable balance of proof. That's what you have in front of you today. If members, your view is that what you seek is to understand the level of harm and why this is unreasonable, then that's fair and reasonable. You can defer on that basis. But I have to direct you, Chairman, to the basis, the core of the reason for refusal, which is a failure to demonstrate. And that is an appropriate reason under the basis of our policies. And today we do have a failure to demonstrate. Evidence has been requested. It has not been returned. And you can hear the serious nature of the concerns that our colleagues who've been good enough to support the committee have expressed. Thank you, Chairman.
Would you like to come back?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I have read these reports that have been submitted, the odour reports and the noise assessment in some detail. And having been on site and actually been involved and spoken with the business and understood their operations and the detail of those operations, had those in-depth discussions, I have then assessed the reports that have been provided, and these people, the assessors, the authors of these reports, have not been out on site. They have not understood the full range of operations that take place on this poultry site and the potential impact this is going to have on the future residents, and therefore they've not considered appropriate mitigation. And what they have suggested is woefully inadequate. I say that with what they have assessed, it has been such a narrow field within that full scope of a range of operations that take place on site. They have literally focused on a very small area, and that area has been favourable. And therefore the results of their assessments do appear favourable. But having been on site and spoken at length with the business and really understood the processes that this business involves and understood the wider impacts, together with the fact that the environmental protection team have also in receipt of regular complaints from other poultry and pig farms around North Norfolk, and particularly this summer as well, we've had one of the worst incidents of fly infestations arising from another poultry farm, where residents are at a much greater distance than the proposed residents would be in this application. So I do implore you to consider the health implications for potential future residents if this development were to be permitted.
Now, look, I'm going to draw this to a close in a very short space of time, because we've now been discussing this for an hour and nearly 15 minutes. But Councillor Fitch-Tillett, I'll just finish with you, and I think we'll have to go to the next stage.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having listened to environmental health and had similar experiences within my ward, whilst I have great sympathy with the applicant, I think in this case, if we were to approve this, our environmental health telephones would be ringing every 5 minutes. I am concerned for public health in so much as those with breathing difficulties, allergies, etc., might decide to buy the house. We all know people don't look what's next door to them when they bought something. So with everything being considered, I will propose that this is refused.
Go with the officer's recommendation.
Absolutely, Madam Chairman.
Do I have a seconder for that?
Sorry, if I may interject, Councillor Heinrich had a proposal to defer, which is on the floor first.
Oh, right. Do you want to take that then?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will withdraw that. I would simply point out, before we move to the vote, the Environment Agency letter, that they had no concerns over the applicant's data. They don't see a problem.
Okay, thank you. Have I got a seconder for this proposal? Oh, yes, sorry, Nigel. Seconded by Councillor Pearce. We now go to the vote. Lauren, would you like to call the names out, please? This is for the refusal, recommendation for refusal, okay?
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett? For. Councillor Grove-Jones?
For.
Councillor Heinrich?
Against.
Councillor Holiday? For. Councillor Kershaw?
Against.
Councillor Lloyd? For. Councillor Pearce?
For.
Councillor Withington? For. So that is 8 votes for and 2 against.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that. That was a very informative discussion. I think we talked it through well, and thank you to the environmental health team for giving us the lowdown on that. And so this application has been refused. Thank you. We now go on to the next application. Let's wait for Mr. Taylor. Just wait for Mr. Taylor. If you would like a comfort break, no, I'm all right. But if you would like a 5-minute comfort break, please, okay. If we could see you back here then at 5 to 11. Welcome back to the meeting. We are now going to our second application, Binham PF/21/2926. And this is being presented by Officer Rubin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is item 9 on the agenda, application PF 212926 for a 2-storey side and rear extension to an existing dwelling at 87 Warham Road, Binham. This item was deferred from the previous Development Committee meeting held on the 20th of January 2022 to enable further discussion between officers and the applicant relating to the materials and positioning of the extension in relation to the existing building. This has taken place and a resolution has now been reached, now put before committee again. The proposed extension has been redesigned to include a reduction in overall length of the extension, along with a small decrease in height, a redesign and repositioning of fenestration, and a slight setback of the linking central section on both the east, which is the rear, and west, which is the front elevations. The walls of the extension will mainly be clad with vertical timber boarding, whilst the roof covering would be reclaimed pantiles. Under the current application, as originally submitted and as presented in January 22, the proposed extension was not at the time considered to be subservient in terms of its scale, due to its overall scale, massing, height and appearance, resulting in an unacceptable form of development. However, since deferral, these amendments to the design have been made, which can be summarised as a reduction in the overall height by about 0.2 metres, a reduction in the width of the north-south extension by approximately 0.7 metres, and a reduction in depth of the extension east to west by approximately 1.3 metres. A redesign and rationalisation of the southern elevation with a large barn-style opening and small ground floor window, a reduction in glazing on the south elevation, and introduction of brick either side of the glazing, a degree of setback that's been achieved of the extension from the main front elevation of the dwelling, and a reduction in glazing on the east elevation, and a shallower roof slope and smaller lean-to addition. Although there remain some minor residual reservations, overall, when balancing this with the positive amendments made overall, the recessed position of the extension and partial screening provided by the boundary wall and trees, and noting that committee specifically requested further negotiations to take place with the aim of a successful outcome, it is now considered that the proposed development is acceptable in respect of design and resultant impact upon the conservation area, complying with policies EN4 and HO8 and EN8 of the core strategy. There are no further objections from the Conservation and Design Officer, no parish council or public objections, and no concerns raised by the local councillor. So overall, to conclude, the officer recommendation is now one of conditional approval for the reasons stated on page 44 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rubin. No parish speakers? No objectors, no supporters, but we do have our local member, Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really pleased that the applicants and the officers have worked together to come up with what seems to be an acceptable solution. And just to put it into a bit of background, this is it's a good story. The applicants own the dairy farm in Binham. They want to succeed that the children are going to take over the dairy farm. The applicants are moving to this cottage to run a new business that they've built in Binham, which is a conversion of a listed barn with the help of conservation. And they've opened the parlour, which is a cafe, breakfast, lunch, dinner, employing 9 local people. So this is a really good example of diversification. But I would like to just thank the officers for taking the time and trouble to engage with the applicants and come to what I think is a very sensible and solution. I'd like to propose approval of this application. Thank you.
You're proposing approval. Okay. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo everything that Councillor Kershaw has just said. It's a good example of applicants working with this council for a favourable outcome. I can't see any planning reasons to not let this one go through, and I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Seconded by councillor Lloyd. I now have councillor Pearce and then councillor Holiday. Councillor Pearce?
No problems at all. I think it's a successful outcome, well reached with work on both parties. I was going to second, but been beaten to the post. There you go.
Such is life, Nigel. Councillor Holiday.
I just wanted to ask when timber became a vernacular cladding material. It says in the design guide that it can be used in small quantities, but this seems to be rather more than small quantities. And to me sits uncomfortably next to flint work. Thank you.
This was one of the points that was brought up in the previous application, and I did bring this up at our pre-meeting. But there have been several instances of timber being used as cladding on new houses, etc. And the timber that's used normally silvers down. It actually just blends into the background. And a very good example of that is a house opposite Cromer High School, which is totally timber clad. And when it was first put on, it was this rather bright orange, but over the last 2 years, it's silvered right down. So that's what we're expecting of this timber cladding on this extension, because it was pointed out some of the, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but some of the flint extensions that are put onto existing flint and that housing don't seem to meld very well because it's different techniques sometimes, but there we go. That's me. Anybody else got anything to say? No. So we then go to a vote. We have a proposer, Councillor Kershaw, to approve the officer's recommendation to approve, and seconded by Councillor Lloyd. Can we go for a vote, please?
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
For.
Councillor Grove-Jones?
For.
Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Holiday? Councillor Kershaw?
For.
Councillor Lloyd? Councillor Pearce?
For.
Councillor Whittington?
For.
That is 9 votes for and 1 against.
Thank you. That has been carried. So this application has been approved.
Members, when we defer items, it may be appropriate on occasion to consider whether or not you would delegate authority to the Assistant Director to determine these cases if they are otherwise acceptable. So it may be worth considering that when you defer items in the future, if they are deferred for amendments to design, etc., etc. The reason it's back in front of you today and we took your time today was because we didn't have a delegated authority to enable that to happen after the case had been called in. Just a point of order, really, Chairman. Thank you.
And we are still waiting for the design guide, the new design guide, aren't we, as well, which I think is supposed to be coming out within a reasonable amount of time.
Chairman, what we need is an additional conservation officer. I'm working on that appointment, but I've been given some news corporately that is proving troublesome. So I will be working through that and I'll update at the portfolio holder meeting in due course.
Thank you. It is important because this is obviously something that we use a lot in this area with so many listed buildings, etc., and conservation areas. Right, now I'm going to be careful how I phrase this because I got myself in trouble last time. Now over to Jeff to present his reports on the development management performance.
Thank you, Chair. Carefully chosen words there. So on the bottom of page 45 of the agenda, you'll see the monthly performance for September 2022. So there's 1 major decision issued within time and 62 non-major decisions issued in time. So the performance figures are pretty good for those. Over 95% of non-majors, within that month were issued within time or within an agreed extension of time. And so the last column is a 24-month average for both majors and non-majors. So both of those are above 80%. If you're wondering why the figure for non-majors is still a little bit low, we're carrying a number of months of poor performance associated with the uniform introduction. So our back office system did impact on our performance for a period of time. So as we move through the quarters, we'll start to lose that from the performance figures, and that actually we'll see an uplift, quite a significant uplift in performance, because past months we've been doing pretty well on performance. Numbers are down in September compared to perhaps what we want to see. There's a number of decisions, but we are working very hard to get those decisions issued. So performance generally is going in the right direction. Number of applications are still coming in. We've had so we've had 250 applications registered in September and 225 applications validated. So the work is not going away at the moment, and yeah, we're working extremely hard as a department.
Can I just ask something before I bring in Fiona to do the 106? During the pandemic, with the fact that people were working from home just to a greater extent, what was the percentage increase in applications coming in for home extensions, etc.? I'm just a rough, I mean, I know I've dropped you right in here, but a rough indication of was there a significant increase?
There was a notable increase. I can't say it was 10%, 15% or 20%, but there was a notable increase in workload. So lots of people who were either moving property or were looking to extend their property to enable them to work at home. So we had a lot of householder applications come in for people wanting to make amendments to the dwelling they're living in. So that wasn't particularly obvious or notable in the numbers for 2020 and 2021.
No, so therefore, I reiterate that we do need some more help with the planning officers. We need good planning officers. We need good conservation officers, and we are down. And I think you all do remarkable work in that you're dealing with 40 or plus cases per planning officer, and you're 3 officers down. Am I correct?
We're down a number of officers at the moment. We are actively recruiting at the moment. So if anyone's watching on the YouTube channel is interested in planning, then please apply for the job. But yeah, so we are actively recruiting at the moment. We've got a number of vacancies at senior level. We've got a couple of training planning officer posts we're looking to recruit. There's a householder assistant post and a planning officer post, as well as a section 106 obligation officer post at the moment. So it's a tough market to recruit in at the moment, but you know, we're doing all we can to get those posts filled.
I think it's been a tough, I mean, I've been on planning now for 11 years, I think it's 10, 11 years. And it's always been a tough market. It hasn't ever improved here. For some reason, North Norfolk seems to find it difficult to recruit officers. I would have thought it's such a lovely area to live, especially if you've got children. It would bump up its acceptability. I'm now going to ask the portfolio holder for planning who wishes to speak.
You're on message, Chair, as usual. Just to say to Jeff, thank you very much for the report and for the work that you're doing. I know that you are facing challenges from having to recruit, but I know that you're on that and that is underway. And I hope that goes well for you. Obviously, as officers get more used to the back office system, I'm sure that will help with performance and perhaps reduce workload as well. But you are quite correct. Officers are carrying a very high caseload at the moment until we get the recruitment sorted out, as we hopefully will do. Thanks, Chair.
Can I now pass over to Fiona for the 106 report?
Thank you. There are 4 outstanding 106s. I've just got a correction on the Scotto Enterprise Park. Officers at North Norfolk District Council have approved the draft section 106 unilateral undertaking that was circulating. I've chased Norfolk County Council and Hethel as the landowner and SC. And I have said, can I have a long stop date? Because I'm being asked to report this to committee, and they have said to when you will sign the undertaking if you're happy with it, and they've asked for a long stop date of the 31st of December. So I've said I will mention that to committee this morning. And so everyone is aware of that. And I can only report what might happen in January 2023 if they haven't signed a document that's been presented to them. I've done all the drafting for them. You know, all they have to do is sign. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Yes, I don't think we need to comment on that really. It's unfortunate they can't find a pen to sign the thing, but there we go. Times are hard. Yes.
Chairman, following the legal officer's commentary, my suggestion will be that as an officer group, we will bring this matter back to you in January to report specifically on Scotto. And we will expect that either the agreement is signed or we will give you an update, which will then give you an action to either extend further, or if there's limited probability, then we may ask to reconsider the application, Chairman.
Thank you.
Good work from the legal team and our officers. We do need to close these matters
Yes,
down.
absolutely. It's been going on for, how long is it now? 4 years. I'm going to pass swiftly on now. Jeff, appeals section.
Okay. So, yeah, so the sort of inquiries in progress are set out across the pages. I'll just go to the back of that section and talk about the new appeal decisions that we received. So we've had two decisions from the planning inspectorate. So we've had one of Blakeney for which proposed outdoor swimming pool. The inspector didn't consider the pool itself would harm the special qualities of the area of outstanding natural beauty, but the fact that the applicant had also applied for another pool on the same site, he felt that 2 would be too many on the site. So actually that's why he dismissed the appeal, because he thought 2 was too much and would have a harmful effect on the AONB. The other one is a Kelling decision, which was also dismissed. The appeal raises a number of issues which we are considering across the department in terms of things like 5-year land supply. So yeah, I'm not wanting to go into a lot of debate today because there's still discussions to be had about how we deal with that as a department. But yeah, so there are issues that come out of the Kelling appeal, even though it was dismissed. Obviously, even when appeals are dismissed, sometimes they raise policy issues or issues of how we determine policy that we need to take on board. So we're sort of absorbing the inspector's decision and working our way forward. But if members had any particular queries or questions on the inquiries, we've updated on the old favourite Arcadia in terms of the date for when it's due to happen, which is the 24th to the 26th of January. But happy to take any questions on any of the other appeals on the list.
Just a question, Madam Chairman. Arcadia, is now all the information in? Because I noticed you've got late submission of information. Are we expecting any more?
We don't really, do we?
I don't think we've been made aware there's any more information expected from the applicant. It's now a question of us responding to that and providing our statements. But
Chairman, for members' benefit, all of the evidence is held now by the planning inspectorate. It's for the planning inspector to consider whether or not they wish to receive any further representations from parties. My understanding is all that is required is now with them, and we simply await January.
Yes. I note that we still have a lot of appeals coming through, which I mentioned last time. We seem to be, I don't think we've got quite so many now as we had at the last meeting, but we are seeming to get more and more appeals going through, which is the right of any applicant, that if they don't like the decision that's made, either by members here or by officers when it doesn't come before us. So, you know, that's their legal right, but we do seem to have rather a lot. Yes, Andrew.
I'm just looking at the minutes of the last meeting. I think at this point in that meeting, we discussed whether we might make representations to the planning inspectorate as to the delays in the handling of appeals and so on. I'm just wondering whether we've made any steps in that direction or whether we're still contemplating what the response should be.
Okay. Jeff?
It's like all of these issues. If you prod the beast too much, sometimes you can have adverse reactions. So it's kind of choosing your words carefully when sort of going back to the planning inspector. clearly we had issues with some decisions were taking a long time to get answers for, and one of those was the Kelling decision, which we now have an answer for. So we were chasing on when we would get that decision. But it's sometimes difficult because we know they're under resource pressures like everybody else. And that's probably why we've got a large number of cases, because there's a lot of cases on hand waiting for inspectors' decisions. So we can chase and send messages to the inspector asking them to speed up, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that we get that any quicker.
Should it be more addressed to the government? I know we've had a ministerial merry-go-round recently, to put it mildly, but what? Well, it's the truth. So I just wondered whether you were wondering who to write to be honest, rather than whether it was the inspector and or the government.
Well, exactly. I don't know who actually was. Who is the new government minister now then?
Michael Gove.
Michael Gove.
We're still awaiting a planning and housing minister, Chairman.
Right.
I think, members, when you actually look at that appeal list, what we've got is a problem with a number of cases where we've got multiple appeals on single sites. That's not unusual, and we do have a situation with some applicants and some parties for effect gaming the system. And there are measures in the Levelling Up Bill that do talk about stronger enforcement. There are measures that talk about repeated applications. So we'll wait to see what comes from those, I believe. I think that the planning inspectorate are under tremendous pressure. We can point members towards the performance tables. The planning inspectorate do have performance tables. There are averages that it takes to deal with particular application types through the appeal process. As I spoke to you last time, Chairman and members here, I believe that the planning inspectorate are suffering from the same woes that the planning authorities up and down the country are struggling from: recruitment, retention, people leaving the profession. There are significant difficulties with the planning system, and I do believe that we need those changes that are going to come forward through the Levelling Up Bill. My understanding from communications is that the Levelling Up Bill should be due for March of next year. So we should be seeing more coming from the ministers in the spring of next year. But that won't deliver you more inspectors at the turn of a heel. It will not.
I did hear on the radio on my way in, because I was listening to Radio 4 when I'm in the car, that there are murmurings about them diluting the Levelling Up Bill as it goes further through. So we'll just have to see. That's normally what happens, doesn't it? Never mind. Anyway, item 12, exclusion of press and public. Nobody's here. No private business, Lauren. No urgent exempt, etc. So I now announce this meeting closed at 11:20.